Okay, so today we will be learning about the CSS. So first, let's just see how to create a CSS file. Give it any name and save it with .css extension. Okay. Now, before we jump right into the concepts, let's just first know what CSS is. Okay. So I think everyone knows that CSS is an abbreviation for Cascading Style Sheet. And the name itself suggests that it is used for styling of HTML document. Okay. And the major advantage of using CSS is that it can control layout of multiple pages at once. Suppose if you're having 10 to 20 HTML files, if there was not a concept of external CSS, then what you have to do is that you have to go to each HTML file and write the CSS on that file. And if you think that if your file size crosses 20 or more than 25, then it's practically impossible to write CSS on 25 files individually. So having a CSS file, it really saves a lot of work and task. Okay. So first, let's see the syntax, how we are going to provide the styling. So whenever you are trying to write the CSS, there should be a syntax to be followed. That is, first you have to write the selector. After that, you have to provide these curly braces. Okay. And the space enclosed by these curly braces is what we call declaration block. Inside this declaration block, what you have to write is the property and its value. Okay. That's a simple syntax of how you're going to provide styling. Now, do remember a few things here, that the value, it shouldn't be enclosed within the double quotes. And after writing this value, you have to end it with the semicolon. Okay. You can write multiple values inside one declaration block. That's not an issue. Every time you declare a property and its value, you have to end it with this semicolon. Okay. Now let's see what this selector is. Okay. There are few selectors which you can use while styling your document. The first one is element selector. And what we do with this is that it's nothing but basically the HTML tags which you are using. Okay. Suppose you are having a paragraph, division, or any H1 level of heading, or any other thing, whether it's span or anchor tag or an image tag. If you want to provide styling to these tags, then you can just write the name of the tag. For example, here P, it denotes the paragraph tag. Use the declaration block. That's it. Inside this, you have to write the property and value. Okay. So this P is what we are calling it as an element selector. Okay. You can use the combination of element selectors too. Suppose if you want to provide styling to the division and paragraph tags simultaneously, then what you have to do is that after selecting one element selector, that is paragraph, provide a comma, and after that, write the name of the another element selector. Okay. So now whatever property you are going to declare inside this declaration block, it will be applied to all the paragraphs and the div tags in your HTML document. Okay. The second type of selector we have is what we called class selectors. Okay. So before moving on, let's first see two attributes. Okay. HTML have two global attributes, most commonly used two global attributes, that is class and ID. Okay. These are the two most commonly used global attributes. And if you want to know what a global attribute is, then you can think of it as it can be used with any HTML tag. Okay. If there is a source attribute which you have used in the image tag, then you should be able to know that this source attribute, it can be used only with the specific tags like image tag. You cannot use source inside this div tag or the p tag. Okay. So we don't call it as an global attribute. But when it comes to class and ID, they are known as global attribute because you can provide class and ID to every HTML tag. Okay, if you want to add class and ID to this paragraph, you can do so. There is no restriction. Okay, now I'm giving it a class as one and ID first. Okay, now when I have written this class as one, what it means is that this div is having a class whose name is one, and this div has a particular ID associated with it, which has the name first. There is a point that you should remember, that multiple tags can have same class name, okay, but you cannot provide same ID to different elements. For example, here you have provided ID first, then you cannot provide the ID first here, okay? But here you have provided class one, then you can provide class one as here, it's perfectly fine, okay? And ID is something that uniquely identifies that element, okay? That's why we don't repeat the ID name in different tags. If you want to add multiple classes to a tag, you can do so with the help of the space. For example, 2. Let's provide this class name to you. Okay. So that was about class and ID. Now coming back to our selectors. So now if you want to target a class and want to change its property, then what you have to do is that first write the class name. Suppose I'm giving a class name as 1. Let's write it outside this block. Is that 1? Provide this declaration block. Now, there's one thing that you should remember, that whenever you are writing a class name, you have to provide a dot before the class name. Okay. And let's give it color as green. It'll be fine. Okay. So that's how you're going to write a class selector. The same is for this ID selector too. If you want to select if you're targeting a particular ID for changing the CSS, then the syntax that you should follow is you have to write the ID name. Let's just see what was the ID name. It's first, then come here and write first, okay, and provide the declaration block. Now, if you are using an ID, then you have to provide hash in front of the ID name. That's the syntax for this ID selector. Okay. For class selector, you have to provide dot before the class name, and for ID selector, you have to provide this hash before the ID name. Now, apart from these, we have another selector that is somewhat known as universal selector, okay? And it has the least priority. Do remember that. Universal selectors are denoted by this asterisk symbol, and you don't have to write anything, just provide asterisk and then declaration block. Inside this declaration block, you have to provide the property and value. Now, once you have provided any kind of value, for example, background color should be red, okay? So what it will do is that all the elements, whichever you are having in your HTML document, every element's background color will be changed to red because we have used universal selector. Now, if any element is having this color, this class selector or this ID selector, then according to the property or value which you have used and the priority order, it will be changed. Okay. Now, since you have known the selectors, there are a few things that you should know, that is units, okay? And it's very helpful. In CSS, we have two types of units, okay? The first unit is what we call absolute unit. And the second one is relative unit, okay? When it comes to absolute unit, example of absolute units can be centimeter, inches, millimeter, dots. All these are example of absolute unit, okay? And when it comes to relative, it can be m, rem, it can be view width, view height, view min, view max. All these are relative units of measurement in CSS, okay? And there is one thing that is most commonly used unit, that is you all have heard, that is pixels, okay, denoted by px, isn't it? Now, which category it falls into, whether it's an absolute unit or a relative unit, it's your task to find it out, okay? I can give you an hint that pixel is what we call, it's a magical unit of measurement in CSS, okay? So go out and find why we say that it's a magical unit of measurement in this CSS, okay? Now let's understand this one by one. It is not recommended to use absolute unit of measurement whenever we are styling. The reason is because suppose you have provided a width of 1 centimeter, okay? So when you are seeing your site on a desktop or a laptop, then you can see that that 1 centimeter space will be very small on your screen size. But the same site, when you will be seeing on your mobile, then that 1 centimeter will appear very large on your mobile screen. So that's why it is not recommended to use this absolute unit of measurement, okay? Because you want your site to be responsive, and that responsiveness can be achieved with these relative units of measurement, okay? So first we have M. So what M is, that it is a unit for font size, you can say that. And whenever you are using this M unit, it can vary according to the element's font size, okay? It does not vary when you are going to change the font style. You have seen that whenever you change a font style, then the font size also changes. But if you are using this M as a unit for your font size, then it will vary only when the element will change, not when you change the font styles. Rem is somewhat very similar to this M. We say rem as a root element because instead of varying on the element size, it takes the font size of its root element and apply it on all the fonts present here. So it is kind of static. It doesn't change, it's constant. Now coming to view width and view height. So I recommend to use this view width and view height whenever you are trying to define width and height, because what view width does is that it represents a percent of the viewport width, okay? Suppose what is viewport? It's simply the screen whichever you are seeing right now, okay? If you are on a PC, then your view width or your viewport will be your size of the screen, and if you are using a mobile phone, then your viewport will be the size of your mobile screen, okay? So if I give something called, if I define width as 10 view width, then what it means is that it's going to save 10% of the total view width, okay? 10% of your view port width. That's what 10 view width means. Similarly for view height too, whatever will be the view height of your screen, it will take that 10%. Okay, for example, I'm giving 20 view height, okay? Then what it means is that 20% of viewport height, okay? That's what viewport and view height are. Then comes vmin and vmax, okay? So whenever we are talking about vmin, it means that viewport minimum unit. That's what vmin is. Now it represents the minimum between the height or the width in terms of the percentage. Okay. For example, I am giving or seeing a unit as 30 V min. So what this 30 V min represent is that it's the 30% of current width or height. Okay, 30% of current width or height, and it depends on whichever will be the lowest. For example, if your width is lower than the height, then that 30 V min will be the 30% of your height. Okay, depending, it just depends on whichever is the lowest. Okay, now if you have understood this V min, then I think there won't be problem in understanding V max. If I provide 45 V max as a value, then what it means is that it means 45% of the current width or height, depending upon whichever is the maximum. Okay, so here we are checking for the lowest, that is the minimum, and here we are checking for the maximum. Okay, suppose you have given some width and some height. Now once you calculate 45% of height, okay, suppose it comes 35 units, and when you calculate 45% of width, it comes 20 unit. So the height has the larger value, so it will take 45% of your height and apply it to that wherever you are using this. So that was about this units of measurement. Another unit of measurement will be your percentage, okay, if you have remembered it. So whenever you are giving a height as a percent, it just calculate the percent of its parent element. Okay, so if you are giving height as 30%, then 30%, it means 30% of the parent element. That was this percent indicates. Okay, and pixel, you have to just explore it on your own. That's a task for you. Now, once you have known the units and the syntax of the CSS, now let's know how we can insert these CSS on our HTML document. Okay. So what you're seeing is ways to insert CSS. Okay. Now there are 3 ways to insert CSS on our HTML document. The first way by which we can insert CSS is with the help of inline CSS. Okay. So what's an inline CSS? For that, head over to your HTML document. Suppose I want to display whatever the text inside this span as a red color. So first I could, to provide an inline CSS to this, first you have to write the style. After that, provide an equals to symbol, then the double quotes. Now, inside these double quotes, you have to provide the style which you want to apply. For this span element, what I want is that the text color should appear red. So what I will do is write color, and what should be the color value? It should be red, and enclose it with the semicolon. Save it. And once you view this site, okay, let it open. The text which was enclosed within the span, it is in the red colors. Okay, so that's what inline CSS does. Okay, and it's really not recommended to use inline CSS, because if you want to target a particular thing, 1 or 2 things on your site, then it's perfectly fine, you can use inline CSS. But if you want to just design your whole site at once, then you can imagine how tedious task it is to, you have to write this inline CSS for each and every element. Okay, and it will be very hectic task. So we have another method for inserting CSS on a file, that is what we call internal CSS. Okay. Now, how we are going to insert this internal CSS is just go to your site, and instead of writing the style here in a particular tags, you can just inside the head tag, you can create, we have a tag called style tag, and inside this style tag, you can provide effects, whatever you are trying to do. Okay. So let's target a class now. Okay. For example, I have this one class. So I want whatever element is having this one class, I want its background color to be changed as let's say blurry wood. Okay. And now when you see your site, okay, all those classes that have this one as a class name, they have been applied with this background color. To know it more clearly, let's create another div, and it will not have that one class. Okay. Define. Now when you see your site, you see this div was having that class, so the background color has been applied only to this div, and this div was not having that class, so no CSS has been applied to it. Okay. Now, the third way of inserting CSS on your file, and it's the most common way of inserting the CSS, that is external CSS. Okay. What you have to do is create an external CSS file. For example, I have this style1.css file, which I'm currently working in. Now you want to insert this CSS file in your document. So what you have to do is that go to your HTML file, and below the title and inside the head tags, provide a link. Okay. Link is a tag. And after that, you have to provide rel. Rel is for relativity, what kind of document it is. So I'm trying to include a style sheet. So provide style sheet here. And after this, you have to provide the reference where this file or this style sheet is. So for this, we're going to use href. And inside this, we have to write the name of our file, that is style1.css. Okay. And close the tag. That's how you're going to include an external CSS file inside your HTML document. Now to see how it works, let's go to our style one and just write any CSS to it. Let's see, I'm going to use this paragraph as an element selector and apply border to it. Okay. That will be 2 pixels. Solid red. Okay. And we will see what this shorthand means. For now, just focus on the changes. Okay. So you reload it. Now you can see that I have changed I have provided a paragraph border. Let's change it to black. And instead of 2, let's have 20. Now. So now you can see that whatever the paragraph was there, that border is not being appeared here. Okay. The reason for this, and let's suppose I'm changing the background color to this green yellow. Now you see what has happened. I have targeted this class, I have declared this class as 1. This paragraph element has a class as 1. And in the style, I have declared this property and value, and that is the background color should be blurry. Now there are 2 reasons. First is that whenever you are including whenever there are two properties applied on the same class or same selector, then the class have larger priority than the normal elements. Okay, so for this, one will take the priority, and the background color would be burly wood, which you can see here. Now, if I remove this, suppose instead of paragraph, I have this division tag. Okay, and I am going to create a paragraph here with no class name, just a simple paragraph. You see, there were two divs. Both divs have the same background color because inside that we have provided the background color as the variable. Now, if I'm going to write the same div and I'm trying to change the background color to red, okay, what you can see is that it's still not being applied. The reason for this is that whenever you are having an external CSS and an internal CSS, the priority is given to the internal CSS. Okay, that's why the color background color red is not being applied there. Okay, if there was no internal CSS in this document, let's comment it out. And now when you are seeing your site, let's remove it from here. Save it. It should work now. Scale the border. 3 pixel. What should be the border? I'm going to give it as black. You can see it has been applied. Whatever the text were there, everything has been applied here. Now, see if I have any other file name with these things. Okay, fine. You see the paragraph which was being overridden by that class priority. Now, once I have removed the class from here, then everything which is being there in this external CSS is being applied to your site. Okay, all the paragraphs have this, what to say, this lemon green kind of background, and the div have the red background. Okay, so to make it really looks ugly, so just remove it. So I hope you understand the priorities. Okay, let's take a note for that. The priority for the CSS file would be inline CSS have more priority. After that, we have this internal CSS as a priority. And after that, we have priority of this external CSS. Okay, so that is the priority of this. Now, if you are having the same thing that I have just shown you right now, if someone's style is being changed with the help of this class selector, and we have this element selector, so and the ID. So let's see this priority too. ID has more priority. After that, we have the priority for this class selector, and then we have the priority for this element selector. Okay, that's the priorities you should remember, so that when the things are not going the way you want it to be, then this thing should strike your mind that maybe the priorities have, maybe there is an issue of priority or I have declared something inside that ID, which is being overriding my current style. Okay. And remove this inline CSS too. Now we will be working with this external CSS only. Now you have known the ways to insert the CSS. Now let's see some common properties that we use while designing. Okay. So the first property that will be used most widely is that the color property. Okay. And before using the color property, you should know what values these color property take. Okay. So you can write the value for the color in, I guess, 3 to 4 formats. Okay. The first way by which you can provide the value is the RGB. The second will be RGBA, and then will be hexadecimal values which we will be providing. After that, there is a one more way to provide value, that is HSL. Okay, let's see them one by one. Now, when your RGBA basically stands for red, green, and blue. Okay, I don't need to write it. Still, let's see, red, green, and blue. Okay. Now, the way by which you can add this color is that you just have to write the color. Suppose you are selecting a div and you want to write the color. So you have to write color, then the semicolon, colon. And after that, you have to write RGBA value. So what you will do is that just write RGB and then the small braces. Okay, inside the small brackets, you have to provide the value for red, green, and blue explicitly. That is, suppose there's 60 and let's say 179 and 113. Okay, let's see what color it is. It's green. Okay, so this value is for the red value, this is for green, and this is for red. That's why we say it's an RGB way of writing color values. Okay, now when you see your division tag, the color will be this green. Okay. Now the another way of writing this color is with the help of RGBA value. So one thing that you should know that the RG and B will be same, that is red, green, and blue. There is one more parameter, that is A. A denotes alpha, okay, and it's the parameter to see the opacity, okay, and its value ranges from 0.0 to 1.0. You can say just don't provide 0.0, but let's say 0.1 to 1.2, okay. That's what the range of alpha is. Okay. Whenever the alpha is having the value of 0.0, it means it is completely transparent. Okay. And when the value is 1.0, it means it is completely opaque. Okay. Now let's see what this transparency and opaque means. Write the color. And this time, let's use a different color. Okay. And have this as 67, 79, and 30. Okay, somewhat darker. Now it's a normal RGB value, so it's green. Now I'm going to add that parameter, that is alpha. Now, so I have to provide one more value, that will be the opacity. So first let's start with this 0.0 value and see what has happened. Okay, now you can see it's completely invisible. Why? Because we have set that alpha, that is the value of opacity, to 0. It means it will be completely, there is the text you can see here, but the color is completely transparent. That's why we are not able to see it. You can see the text is still here, but you cannot see that because we have set that opacity to 0. Now if we increase this alpha value, say 0.5, then you can see somewhat lighter text is being appeared here. Okay. And if you set this opacity to full, that is 1, it will be completely opaque, and this is the natural color. So now once you have known the Rgba values, now after Rgba we have another way of representing this color, that is hex values. Okay, hex values are nothing but the hexadecimal values. Let me write something for you. Hex values denotes hexadecimal values, and it takes the values in form of Rgba. Okay, that's how it takes values. Now Rgba, it means that this red will have the value from 00 to ff, that is the hexadecimal values. Okay, 00 is the lowest one and ff is the highest value. Same for this green and same for this blue. Okay, let's see how this Rgba value we are providing. So right here, and then we have to provide the hexadecimal value, and whenever you are going to write this hex value for the color, you have to use this hash symbol. Okay, that's how you will see that it's a hexadecimal value, and it's quite easy for if I want this text to appear as a green, dark green color, so you have to do just provide 00 ff 00. That's what green is, and the reason is very simple. See, the first two digits are for red, the second two digits are for very nice 00 ff 00. Okay, now see, the first two digits were for the green, the second two digits were for the, so sorry, the first two digits were for the red, the second two digits were green, and the last two digits denotes the value for the blue. So I have said red and blue as 0 and green at its maximum. So that's why this color is being appearing as green. Suppose if I write ff here and rest all are 0, then I think now you can guess what will be the color. It will be red. Why? Because the green and blue value I have set it to 0 and the red is being set to maximum, that is ff. Now let's see. See, it's being red. Nothing much. Now I think now you are able to use the different parameters for the color, okay, according to your need. The last one was HSL. So I can give you a hint. I'm not describing it why HSL is used and where to use it. The reason is because this is something what when you will practice, you will yourself understand what it is doing, and it's a very great tool if you want your site to have an attractive combination of colors. Okay, so HSL, the H in HSL stands for hue. S is for saturation, and L is for light. Okay, whenever you are using this HSL value, you can change all these parameters, that is hue, saturation, and light, okay, of the color whichever you are using. Now, the another property that you will use quite frequently will be the background. Okay, so I have used quite a lot of times now, that is background color. What it does is that it sets the background color to whatever color you are providing. Okay. See, the div will have this background color. Change it to sets. That should be fine now. Just still it's look ugly, but focus on the styling. Let's give it as okay, it will really look. Set it as black. Now, apart from this background color, we can set the image as a background too. Okay. So again, just to have this background, body to have the background. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to set background image. Okay. And to set the background image, you have to just write this URL and the small braces. Okay. And inside the double quotes, you have to write the source of the image wherever you are having. Suppose if I'm having it on my local desktop or in my local system, I will write that path. And if it's on the internet, you have to provide the link here. So if I have this, some kind of images in my images folder, and just use this. Okay. Now when you see, okay, see the image has been applied as a background color. Okay. Now you can see that the image is just this one, but it's being repeated every time to fill the whole body of your site. Okay, so you can stop this repeat. We have another attribute that is background repeat property. If you set it to no repeat, then your background image will not be repeated. See, that's how small this image is, and it's not being repeated. If you want your image to be repeated only in the X direction, you have to just write repeat X. That's it. And it's only repeating in the X direction. Okay, and if you don't provide any values, it will just see whatever is good to fill the whole body. So you see the repeat was required to fulfill the whole body of your site. So the repeat has been applied. Now, apart from this, we have something called background position, right? This background as a no repeat, so that the next property you can visualize it very clearly. That is background position. Okay. Now, if you set this background position to right, see what's going to happen. See, the image has been shifted to right and it is being treated as the background. You can see from this text and the color. Okay. So if you want your particular background to be set in a particular location, you can use this background position here. Okay. Now there is a shorthand for writing all these things. Okay. That shorthand is, you just, instead of writing this background image, background repeat, background color, background position, you can use the shorthand. Okay, that is, comment it off, just write background, provide a colon, and after that the first thing will be your background color. I'm setting it as white. Okay, now then the next value that this shorthand will take is the background image. Okay, so if you are having a background image, you can have this URL and provide this as images slash. Okay. It won't be able to see what has happened, so just change it to black. Okay, there, then we have this URL. After that, you have to write repeat or no repeat. If there is a requirement of writing it, you can write no repeat. And the last value is the position where you want it to be placed. So I'm going to write it as white. Provide a symbol. Now let's see what has happened. You see the background has been, the background color is being applied. The background image is also being applied, and the position of that was right. So it is being, so this image is in the right side. Okay. So that's how you're going to, instead of writing these 3 to 4 lines, you can just simply wrap it up in this single line. Okay, do remember that which place is for what. The first one is for color, the second place is for the URL or the image, then the third property is for whether it has a repetition or not, and the last one is for the position. So that was all about the background. Now we have another thing that is known as border. Okay, so just delete this. Okay, now we have this border property, and inside this border we have, I'm using the shorthand directly. Now you can just, once I have explained you this background shorthand, the same shorthand is for border too. Okay, the first value it takes is the border width. So suppose if I'm giving a border width of 12 pixels, then it means that whatever the border is going to be applied, its width will be 12 pixels. After that, we have the border style. What kind of border it will be? It can be a dotted border, it can be a solid border, it can be a doubled border. So for here, I'm just writing this dotted border. Then after that, you have to write the color of the border. Okay. What should be the color? Let's say it as black. And just do. Let's see. You see the dotted border has been applied to both the divs. Since the border width was quite large, so you can easily see the dots here. But if I change this width to 2 pixels, you can just see how, what different this has. Okay, that was all about the border. You can just try it out. There are dotted border, there is this solid border too. And you see it's a solid line. Then we have this double border, you can change it to double. Save it. And then we have this double line border, you can see there is a 2 lines for a single border. That's what border does. It's up to your exploration and your thinking how you're going to mix it. Then we have something called margin and padding. Okay, so what margin is that? Margin is the space around the element and outside any border. Okay, and padding is also the space around the elements content, but it is inside the border. Okay, so if you have seen here, these two divs are, what to say, there's no gap between these two divs. If I want these two divs to be separated, so what I have to do is I will provide margin to that. Okay, so let's target the div individually. This div has class 1. Okay, this div has class 1, and let's provide this div the class 2. Okay, now go to the side, and what I want is that whichever element is having that 2 class, there should be the top margin of 20 pixels. Okay, now you see a margin has been applied to this second div which was having the class 2, and the top margin was of 20 pixels. So there is a 20 pixel of gap between these two divs. Okay, now if I want, let's see what padding does. I said padding also provide the space around the element, but it is inside the border, right? So let's provide padding of 20 pixels. Same. And let's see what has happened here. You see the padding has been provided. Okay, previously without padding, these spaces which you're seeing right now between the border and the content, it was not there. But once the padding has been provided, it kind of provides space between the content and the border. Okay, and what margin does is that it provides space outside the borders, you can see here. Okay, that was all about margin and padding. Now, once you have known this margin and padding, there is something what we called as box model. Okay, you can easily see this here. The figure which you are seeing here right now, this thing is what we called a box model. Okay, so a box model kind of wraps it wraps around every HTML element. Okay, and it consists of the contents, the padding, the border, and the margin. If I choose this div here right now, okay, and now if I'm seeing its box model. So I can easily see that, okay, this one is the content and it's it occupying 708 times 72 times of area. Then we have this padding, and the 20 units of padding is applied on the both side, on every side of the content. Then we have this border that is of 2 pixel, and then we have this margin of 20 pixel on the top. Okay, you can see. If I give suppose I'm giving a margin of 30 pixel here. So you see a margin of 20 and 30 is being applied. If I change this border to 20, no, 20 will be way too large. Let's change it to 5. Okay. Now you can see a 5 pixel border is on the top and the rest is having 2 pixel of borders. Okay, so that what a box model is. It just gave you simply an idea about an HTML element in form of blocks, box. Okay. Now, after this, if you want to change the font family, you have that font family, this thing. You can choose anyone. For example, just choosing monospace. I see the font style will be changed. Okay. So font family is used for changing the style. Now after this, another thing that is really most common is this display. Okay. Let's target another div so things don't get messed up. I have this paragraph tag, right? This div, and just give a class name of outer. Okay. And just let's copy it so it will save the time. Let's have this one class. Now let's repeat it again. The reason why I'm doing it is something that will be able, that will help you to visualize things. Okay. Just this one. Then we have second. Okay. Now let's provide a class A to this span and a class B to this span. Okay. Same thing goes for every. Write this class B, and here we will have this class B. Okay. Same for this. Write class B, and in this one the class will be B. Okay. Now coming back to your CSS, there is something dot outer. Okay. Now we have something called display. Okay. So what display does is so we have different values for display, that is block, inline, content, flexbox. First, let's see the block values. Okay. Target it to dot E class and provide a background color, and it should be somewhat very highlighted. Now, if you see all the spans which are having class A, once I have set this display to block, it is being treated as block. By default, the span elements are inline elements. So there's one thing that you should remember: what is an inline and a block element. So there's a major difference between them. The block element takes the full width, whereas the inline element only take the necessary space required. Okay, suppose if I change this block to inline, okay, and now when I see that, you see, when the display was blocked, it was taking the whole width of the screen. Now once I have changed the display to this inline, you can see that it is only taking up the space that is used by the content inside the span document. Okay, that's a major difference between display and inline. You can use both of them simultaneously, it's not a big deal. Based on your requirements, CSS is always based on your requirement. You have to think what kind of display I want, whether I want a inline display or a block display. According to that, you have to change the properties. Okay, now there we have something called inline block 2. Okay, if you see here, there's this inline block. Yes. Okay. Now you see what inline block has done is that it's treating that text as an inline as well as a block elements. There are certain restrictions that if you declare something, if you declare your display as an inline, you cannot change its height and width. Okay, so see, if I am writing this inline here and I'm providing width as 50 pixels, let's say 5 pixels, no, let's say 50 pixels. Okay, now when you see that, the width is not changing. Okay, it's still the same way, it is still taking these two words as a background. So if you have declared any display inline, its width cannot be changed. But if you declare it as a block element, or now just comment it off, and now when you are seeing it, it's taking the full width, and now when you just comment, now you see it's taking this the width being provided to you. Okay, now after this we have something called position, and it is very useful thing. So let's create a div. Okay, division tab, write a text. Now what I want to do is that I want to give it a class too, so it will be easy. I'm giving this class as position. Now if you come back to your CSS and target this position class, and you provide this position property to, by default, every HTML element has this static value as default value. Okay, if you want to change it to relative, you can do so. Just provide a background color. So okay. Now here's this div. What I want is first just change the height of it. As okay, now it's pretty much good. So what I want to do is that I want to change its position to relative. Now what relative position does is that it's changed the position of the current element relative to its previous position. Okay, now if I write left as 40 pixels, now you see it has changed its position from 40 pixels from its original position. Okay, that what relative position does. Then we have something called fixed and sticky. Okay, it will be easier for you to do this with the help of an example. Okay, you can see the text are being overflowed here. So to fix this, we have a property called overflow. Okay, sorry, overflow property. And once you set it to scroll, we will have the scrollable contents inside this. Now you see it's being a scroll bar is being provided, and so all your contents can be scrolled inside that. Okay, now if you use any other property, it will clip it off. You have to explore it on your own. Okay, so that was all about position. You can change it to the fixed position too. Suppose if I change it to fixed and just provide a large div that is, okay. Then again write. Okay. Now it will be somewhat easier for you to understand. Okay. So that was all about this position attribute. Now there is one more thing that you should remember, that is the z index. Okay, and it's very important thing to understand this z index. I'm just creating two divs. Okay. And the other div will be, okay. Now what this z index does is that first just define our two block, upper and lower. Just write height and width. And I'm going to provide the same width for 200 pixels. Okay. Now, for this upper one, what you have to do is just change the position to relative and have this background color as dark green. Okay. And just write 100 pixels. Then we will have this left as 45 pixels. Okay. And provide a z index that is z index here, and set it to -1. Okay, or 1, whatever you want to do. The same set of things should be repeated for this lower block too. Just change it to lower, and this z index should be -1. Let's change this top to 50 so it will be easily visible, and left should be, let's say, 5 pixels. Now let's see what's happening. See, there the two indexes are right now being overlapped here. Okay, so if I change it a little bit with the z index, say I'm going to give a z index of 23 here, and change the background so that you'll be able to see. Change it to red. Okay. Still being overlapped. Okay. So what this z index does is that when the two positions are being overlapped to each other, as you can see the case here, if it's being overlapped, with the help of z index, we can just clearly tell which element should appear in front and which element should appear in the backward, and it takes the order in front of the in form of a stack. So lower is the z index value, the more backward that element will appear, and the higher is the z index value, the more forward that uh, element will appear. Okay, so I think that's what all about the basics of HTML, and let's end this session because we have crossed the time. Finished, now it's over. You can just provide the sheet. But there is one thing that I would like to tell you, that whatever I have taught you right now, you can use only those things. And one more thing, that was a Flexbox. You can use those things and design a keyboard. Okay, the simple layout of a keyboard. Okay, with the help of this position and the z index and the background and the opacity, you will be able to design that keyboard. And once you have decided that, okay, so once you have used all those things to design that keyboard, it will be the concepts that I have told you right now, it will be crystal clear. You will be able to know when I have to use which kind of position, and when what kind of display should be used when I'm trying to create the keys. So it's a very good project. You can just try it out on your own. Okay. If there is a time, then let's see what Flexbox does. Okay. Let me share the screen again. Okay. Okay, when you want to create the Flexbox, there should be a container Flexbox first of all, and inside that your content should be there. So first let's create a div and give it a class as Flexbox, Flex container. Okay. Now, okay, so what I'm teaching you right now is how to use the Flexbox. Okay, so create a Flexbox here, and inside this I'm creating 3 divs. Okay, with the name, with the values a, with the values. It's a very simple thing. I'm just giving you an idea how to use the Flexbox. Okay. Now let's go to our style sheet. Do remember that the name of this div, container div, is Flex container, and inside we have 3 divs coming here. Now let's just use that class, which was this Flex container. Now, first thing that you should do is to have the display set as Flex. Okay, set it as Flex. Now, the parent containers, you have to change that display to Flex. Do remember that. Don't just go out and change the elements display as Flex, then it will be what will the outcome you will see when you try to do that. Okay, maybe it will not work. So do remember that whenever you are trying to give a Flex, you give it to the parent container. Okay. After that, let's give a background color. So I'm giving it a stock. Then you can set the height and the width. using pixels for this. 400 pixels. Then width will be, let's say 450 pixels. Okay, so that's it. Now, there's something that I would like to share something with you. That is use this flex, and we use this equals or greater than symbol, or you can say this is as a right angular braces, and we write div. Okay, so this syntax what I have written right now here is what we call a combinator kind of syntax. Okay, so what this line means is that choose all those divs whose parent element is having this as a class name. Okay, so we will search. What is happening right now is that we will search for this div that is having this class name. Once it is found, then it will target all the divs that is present inside that class. Okay, so this is what the syntax means. And after that, you have to just give any margin that is 10 pixels, let's say. Then give a padding to of 10 pixels, let's say. And then let's change this background color, okay, to this dark one. Now when we will see it, okay, you can see what has happened here. Let's change this position first. Make this absolute. Now you see what has happened here. That the container, this is the dark green color background, what you are seeing right now is our container on which we have applied that display as a Flexbox. Okay, by default we take this display as a, the Flexbox direction by default is the row one which you are seeing right now. If you want to change this display, you can just change the flex direction. Okay, we have something called flex direction, and you can change it to this row which is currently being applied. So I guess nothing is changing. And if you change it to column, then you can see the directions will change. Okay, so that's what it does. Don't get confused that when I'm using the column, you can see it is at act as a row. No, it's not. When you are giving the flex direction as a column, what it is doing is that it is vertically dividing, it is horizontally dividing that container element, okay, according to your divs. Okay, so I was having 3 divs inside my flex container, so it has horizontally divide this container in the according to the elements, that is this. Now if I use a row, then it is going to vertically divide that area, so we can see that it's the orientation of their divs have changed. Okay, so and this Flexbox is very useful when you're going to go for responsive designing, because you don't have to take care of the margins and the padding all the time. It just divides your content accordingly, according to the divs which you are having. Okay, so if I create another div inside this, okay, name it as D. So you see, I don't have to take care of the margins, paddings. Okay, if you are going to create this type of layout, with the help of padding, spacing, and position, it will be a very, very hectic task. You have to provide specific margins and padding for each one of this div, and you have to provide the positions to whether it's relative or absolute, whatever, what type of position you want, you have to decide that. But if you use this Flexbox, it just does things for you. Okay, and it will be quite responsive too. So that's it. That was all about the basics of the HTML. Okay, there in the display, you have seen we have this. Sorry, in the display we have a display as flex. You have seen display block. You have seen display inline. Now we have something called display none and visibility hidden. Okay, and these two are quite the effect of these two is same, but there is a very minute difference between them. Okay, suppose let's target one div. Okay, let's use this paragraph. I'm going to provide this inline css for this color, change it to this, and have this class as this. Okay, let's find where is our class. So this one is it. Let's use something else. Let's use image. Okay, it's really very helpful. Provide the source, and inside the image I have this tree. Okay, let's use this. See, I have this picture. Change its height and width, and set it to 1 pixel. Similarly for width, just change it to 200 pixels. Change it to 220 pixels. Okay. Okay, now it's there. Now what there's something called float property which you have quite known. So let's just see what this float property does. I have this image. I want this image to float on the right side of my page. So what I will do is that I will just provide float and give it the value right. Okay. So now once you see the image is shifted to the right side. So that what float does. What I was trying to do was to tell you the difference between display none and visibility hidden. Okay, so let's say display and set it to none. Okay, now you see the image is gone. Why? Because we have set its display to none. Okay, if you see here this image, it's not there. It's kind of completely removed, and once you remove any element, it does not affect the layout of your thing. It's like it was never there. When you set the display to none, it is same as saying that there was no element in that place. But when you do this, instead of doing this display none, if you use this visibility hidden, then let's see what it does. Let's provide a border too. Okay, so when I inspect it, it will be easier to see. Okay, now you see the element is still invisible on your side, but it is occupying the space which it should have been occupying when it was visible. To see that, you can just inspect it. Okay, to this image tag, you can see the space is still being occupied by that image block, and it will affect the layout of your site. Okay, if you use visibility hidden, the major difference, I think now you can see that when you use visibility hidden, the space which was occupied by the element, that remains there. But if you use display none, it is same as that element was never there. So the space is being freed. Okay. The main, and you can use visibility hidden or display none when you integrate it with the JavaScript. Okay, it will be quite useful thing. Suppose you want something to appear on your site. Okay, suppose that if I click on this, uh, suppose it's a button, and when I'm clicking on this, I want that a text should appear on the same page. It shouldn't direct to the rest page, and the rest of the background should be invisible. So with the help of this display none or visibility hidden, we can achieve that thing. Okay, and a little bit of JavaScript too. With the mixture of these three, we can achieve that thing. So it's quite a useful thing, this display none and visibility hidden. So that's all about the basics of the CSS. Now I think you are able to do a lot of things with these basics. Okay, so let's end this session here.